afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Father Show. And I'm your host, Mike Thompson. So today I've got a real special guest, and I have been looking forward to having this man on the show for a long time. We talked about it about 2-3 months ago, and just the conversation we had at that event was like, oh yeah, we've got to do this on the air and talk about some stuff.
Right.
So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to welcome Mr. Randal Craven. And Randy is a licensed professional counselor and also a certified addiction counselor. I didn't know you were a certified addiction counselor.
Yeah. We so I've got certification in 2 areas where I treat people, and one is addictions, and the other one is just general counseling.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, well, we'll talk some more, but I want to have you back on the show because we like talking about, well, we don't like talking about it, but we do talk about addictions.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to have another show on that anyway, so
Yeah.
Love to have you back on doing that as well. But Randy is a writer. He's writes for the Body of Christ, which is a local Colorado biblical publication. And his latest article is a universal institution. And this is what we're going to be talking about today. And I know that doesn't really tell you a whole lot, but just stay tuned and you're going to hear a whole lot. Because I know Randy's got his point of view and I've got mine. And we're going to try to, well, agree to disagree or come to terms on what. So hopefully we can clear up some things in regards to same-sex marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And that is going to be our topic today, and I've been looking forward to this. I mean, we all know about the lady in Kathy Davis, and God, what is she? She is in, I can't remember Kentucky, but some state. She would not. She's the clerk at the courthouse, and she would not issue a marriage license to a gay couple. And to the point, it got so serious that they end up having to put her in jail for contempt.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody wanted her in jail, but because of her belief, she would not issue a license to these 2 men that wanted to get married. And, it's like, to me, I don't know. I understand your belief,
Mm-hmm.
but you're working for the public.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a very thin line there. How are you going to put your belief over your job?
Get a new job?
And and that's it. You get a new job.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't like what they've asked you to do, or you don't agree with what they ask you to do, then you either have to agree and do it, or disagree and do it, or move on.
And there may be some steps in between that, because you do have a thing called civil disobedience.
Mm-hmm.
And if it is your job, let's say, for example, as a police officer, and you're asked to do something that you morally disagree with,
Mm-hmm.
you do have the right to refuse to participate in that, let's just say, command,
Mm-hmm.
based on your moral grounds. And so ultimately, actions that are taken by civil servants, especially in this area of same-sex marriage, may have to be sorted out by the court at some future point.
Yeah, and that's pretty much where she is. Oh, that's right, she's from Kentucky. And that's really what is going on with her, because they've taken her to court, and because these guys have tried to get a license multiple times, and she refused to issue a license, even though, state-wise, they say now it's okay for same-sex marriages. But she was like, nope, I'm not going to do it. They went to court, and the court says, yes, you have to issue a license. And she's still like, nope, I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And eventually, going back and forth, the court just finally said, okay, well, we got to hold you in contempt.
Mm-hmm.
And, they arrested her. And, you know, both sides of the fence, you know, there's protesters out there for gay rights and there are protesters out there for anti-gay rights. And neither one want to see the woman get, you know, put in jail.
Right.
They, but you know, she's caught. She's caught in the middle. Like you said, you have a choice. You can do it or you don't. But how is that going to play out in the court?
Yeah, we don't know yet, and it may end up like it has, you know, with this latest Supreme Court decision, you know, that has more or less legalized same-sex marriage on a federal level.
Mm-hmm.
And so a person may be forced, you know, to participate in same-sex marriage, even though it is a violation of their personal belief system.
Mm-hmm.
But ultimately, the question is, can the state force you to believe something that your God tells you is wrong?
But I don't think anybody's trying to force her to believe in something, as it is in a sense, and lack of a better way of putting it right off the bat, do your job.
Well, I think you make a good point, Mike. But look at the same situation I think we had here in Colorado, where the baker, who owned a private business,
Right.
was being asked to do a cake for a same-sex couple.
Mm-hmm.
And because this baker did not believe in homosexuality or same-sex marriage, they sued him.
Yeah.
They took him to court,
Mm-hmm.
and he lost
Yeah.
the lawsuit.
Yeah.
And so now he's being forced to make a cake that he doesn't believe
Yeah.
is in harmony with his moral foundation.
And see, in real aspect, I don't agree with that decision. Because this is my business. This is my business.
Right.
You have a choice to come here or don't.
Right.
Okay, so if I choose to say no, but you know, when we think about it, that kind of goes back to our days of trying to be free. Because how many, you know, I grew up in the South, and you still have some small places that like white only. So I have a right to serve you or don't serve you, which we found out was wrong. So I think they were going on that premise, you know.
And I don't like that comparison.
I know. It's a heck of a, but it's still, here's a man that's saying, hey, I have a right to refuse service to anyone. And the court is saying, no, you can't. And it still goes back to, you know, if say a person don't want to serve a gay couple, I don't want your business. You know, where do we draw the line? You know, it's such a thin line at that point, because you can say, no, I don't want to serve you because you're gay. I don't want to serve you because you're black. I don't want to serve you because you're Asian. I don't want to serve you because you're white. I don't want to serve you because it could never end.
Well, it could definitely go on for infinity, but the issue is this is more of a civil rights issue. And I would kind of agree with the courts in the sense that it is uncivilized to deny service to a person just because of their, let's just say, sexual orientation.
Right.
I believe that deviates from a standard of decency for how we should treat one another based on who we are as human beings. But who we are as human beings and how we treat each other civilly is different than same-sex marriage. Because when you get into same-sex marriage, that's not a civil rights issue. Same-sex marriage is a human rights issue, and there's a distinction between the two.
Yeah. Like I said, we got to take a break, and I hate these breaks because we just get into a good conversation and we have to take a quick break. But ladies and gentlemen, you are listening to The Father Show, and I'm your host, Mike Thompson, with our special guest, Randal Craven, today. And we are talking about same-sex marriages, and you you've got to stay tuned because this is going to be a fantastic show. I love the way Randy thinks, but I also like playing devil advocate as well. So stay with us, and we'll be right back. Well, welcome back, everybody, and you are listening to The Father Show, and thank you for joining us and staying tuned in with us. So before we took a break, we were really talking about the baker that was forced to bake a cake for a gay couple that wanted his service, and he was like, no, morally I can't do this. This is against, everything that I believe in. And we all, we're kind of sitting here in the break, and we all kind of agree that it is a problem because this is a private business, even though it's for the public. And compared to this lady, Miss Davis, who is working in a public place, paid by taxpayers, and you're saying, no, I'm not going to issue a license. But you brought up a good question, and let's define what we say as a civil rights and moral rights and so forth.
Yeah, so when you look at it, when you look at marriage as an institution, marriage as an institution has been around long before the creation of the United States. This is an institution that's been around for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
You have individuals who are Bushmen in Kenya or in the Kalahari Desert who are married,
Mm-hmm.
and that these communities, tribes, or what have you, they value the institution of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
When the United States, who does not own the concept,
Right.
that concept existed before the United States of America. We don't own the concept. So therefore, how do we then have or take the right to have the authority then to change the concept or the institution of marriage, to redefine it?
Mm-hmm.
So when we take the institution and we say that, well, it can include more than just a union between a man and a woman,
Mm-hmm.
that can impact the entire human community who is committed to a concept universally that is an institution or a union between a man and a woman. So when
Mhm.
the United States says, well, we can open it up to a man and a man, then we make the institution vulnerable to other forms of marriage
Mm-hmm.
that then we may disagree with. But if we make it okay for one, then we're going to have to make it available to others. So let me give you an example real quick, Mike.
Okay.
Real quick.
Okay.
If we allow a man and a man to marry, or a woman and a woman to marry, what's wrong with polygamy, which is now outlawed?
Mm-hmm.
So you have one man and several women. You have a man in Montana right now who's filing a lawsuit against the state of Montana because he has one wife and another woman that he's living with, who he's married symbolically to,
Mm-hmm.
but the state doesn't recognize her as being part of his marriage.
And then he moves to Utah.
Okay? So, right. But you have then popular culture saying, well, it's okay for a man and a man to marry, but it's not okay for a man to marry 5 women.
Mm-hmm.
You also have instances where you had a man in the Great Lakes region who wanted to marry his biological daughter.
Mm-hmm.
And incest is legal in the state of New Jersey.
Yeah. I remember you telling me that.
Yeah.
That blew me away.
Yeah, and so if we're going to allow for the redefinition of the institution of marriage, if we allow it for one alteration, then how are we then going to then close off other alternative forms of relationship if we include one?
Mm-hmm.
How do we deny the others?
Well, I think eventually that's going to come to a head because you think about it. And the way I look at it is that, okay, at once upon a time, black and white could not get married.
Mm-hmm.
And that changed. We look at the gay community, or like I said, in Utah, you got one man and multiple wives. Why you want to do that? I don't know. I think one is good enough.
more difficulty.
in it today. You know, so I
Mike, I'm
understand
having
what
a
you're
problem with you comparing race and culture with
No.
homosexuality.
No, I'm just
You said
saying-
at one point in time, blacks and whites were not allowed to marry,
Mm-hmm.
and you're kind of comparing that to same-sex marriage.
No, I'm not comparing. I'm just saying that at one point in time, it was a law that you could not. It was a law that we couldn't even look at a white woman without getting our heads beaten up or hung. And grant you, it's different. It is different. However, don't you hold that sign up. However, when you're looking at same-sex marriage, I mean, in certain countries, you know, a man can marry and have multiple wives.
Mhm. Correct.
And that's their definition of a marriage.
Right.
We have a definition that is supposed to be a man and a woman. Now, some people want us to change it, so
That's Christian.
that's a Christian,
so you're
and
talking
we're a
about-
Christian-based country.
Right. And you're
basically.
talking about countries that have Islam as their
Right.
basis, and they allow for polygamy. But those are the only two forms of valid,
Yeah,
religiously valid forms of marriage, where you have monogamy and polygamy.
yeah, and that's kind of what I'm trying to get to, and I think, is the fact that different cultures have different rules, you know, in regards to marriage. And who can be married to whom. And, you know, when you told me about New Jersey, that just floored me. I mean, we shouldn't need a law, but we do need a law to make sure a man doesn't marry his daughter, or a mother doesn't marry his son, or, you know, some...
Right, but that, Mike, right there, that gets at the foundation
Yeah,
of who gets to say how we define marriage. Who
Right.
gets to say?
yeah,
And so if you and I have a problem with a biological father marrying his daughter, but this particular father as an individual says that he should have the right to
Mhm.
do that, who
Mhm.
gets to say?
yeah. That's a
Who
good
has the
question.
authority to
Who
then to
can-
define
Yeah,
what constitutes marriage?
yeah. Who's gonna tell me I can and cannot do something? You know, if I wanna do it, I mean, medically, it's not a good idea. Because
Right.
if you're trying to reproduce, that is gonna cause a problem. That's one of the main reasons. I mean, morally, it doesn't even seem right, you know, in most people's minds.
Right.
It doesn't even seem right. You wanna marry your daughter? That's crazy. But who's to say?
So as you know, as Christians and as
Mhm.
people who have a faith and a belief in God or a supreme being or what have you, or divinity, as human beings, do we have the authority to determine what's right or wrong, or does that authority belong to God?
In biblical sense, it belongs to God,
Mm.
because God said, "Let I be the judge.
Mhm.
You are not supposed to judge someone else."
Right.
So,
So that tree that was in the middle of the garden, where we talked about good and evil,
mhm,
right and wrong, God says you don't really get to consume this particular tree, fool with any of the rest of them in the garden.
mhm,
But this particular one, you don't get to consume, because once we give mankind the right to decide right and wrong, then civilization starts to decline from there. Because
So-
then we get to decide, well, do we kill this particular species or don't we?
mhm.
You know, do we kill, this particular form of mankind or don't we? And who gets to have the authority to decide whose life has value and whose doesn't?
So who do you think should have the authority?
God has the authority.
That's the only person.
That's it.
Okay. So
God
if
is the only entity that
Right.
has the authority to define truth, what is right and wrong.
Right. Okay.
Randy doesn't get to decide that.
No, and Mike don't either.
Okay.
And Clarence might, but we don't know where. But no, it's we as human beings on this earth do not get that right to decide.
Correct.
So how are you going to make a law to say yes or no if you can't make a decision on whether it's morally right? Now, grant you, I know in the Bible it says the man should marry a woman and a woman should marry a man. It doesn't say anything about man to man or woman to woman.
Mhm.
So I think that's what you're.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
That's
that's what
where
you're
we
going
get
on.
the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And even in this country, um, uh, the laws and the Constitution are supposed to be based on, biblical law.
Mm-hmm.
Biblical law and moral law are supposed to be the foundation of man-made law.
Mm-hmm.
And when we start to then create our laws that then deviate from universal truth or moral law, that's when we start to get into trouble.
Mm-hmm. So let me ask you something, just off the top of my head. Islam.
Mhm.
What God are they praying to? Is it a different God or a
Now,
same
Mike,
God?
you changing the subject,
I know,
man.
I know, but I'm gonna get back to it.
You,
But I just want
this
to.
guy, Clarence. Now we're gonna talk about Islam.
But no. The only reason I'm saying that is because if some people say that we're still praying to one God, there's only one God. You can call him whatever you want to.
Mhm.
Jehovah, God, whatever.
Yahweh,
Yeah.
Jehovah, Yoruba, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So you're praying to one God. So if God has said in Christian religion, no, you can't have a man and a man get married. Or let's go back to make it a little simpler. There's one. You get a husband and a wife, and that's it. So you go to Islam, and they still praying to the same God, but they can have multiple wives. So who is saying? That's sometimes when I think about it, it's like, all right, we got one God.
Yeah, but Mike, what you're
Who
doing?
wrote it?
Okay, so but the issue is this: within the religion of Islam,
Mm-hmm.
polygamy is allowed.
Mhm.
Not everybody who is a Muslim is a polygamist.
No, not at all.
So polygamy, if you look at polygamy,
Mm-hmm.
it has a very specific socializing function.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've studied this,
That's why
deep,
you're
right?
here. That's why you're here. I'm not gonna tell you I studied it.
Well, I mean, and I respect what you know about religion and polygamy and monogamy as well. I'm just saying that when we look at polygamy, we have to look at the intent and function of it, along with the morality of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can talk about that as well, because ultimately the only reality we have is oneness. That's the only reality.
Yeah.
But then the question becomes, well, what is allowed in terms of marriage for socialization and reproduction?
Okay. All right. Well, we got to take another break. And like I said, I like being the devil's advocate, and I'm gonna bring out some because I know people are going to be asking that question. They want to compare. Wait a minute. What is that? What does that mean? And so that's why I want to make sure we get it out. But, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to The Father Show, and we'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, and you're listening to The Father Show, and our guest today is Randal Craven. And Randy is a psychologist and an addiction counselor, and we are talking today about the psychology piece of it, because we're talking about same-sex marriages and really getting deep. So before we left, you were talking about multiple husband having multiple wives, and you saying in Islam that's okay and that's their rules. So,
Well, not only Islam, but like the Mormons practice
Right.
Polygamy.
mm-hmm.
There's a number of religions in the Asian world that practice polygamy, and
Mhm.
even a number of traditional African religions practice polygamy.
Right.
Now, let's look at it like this, Mike. If your population, your community was decimated by war,
Mm-hmm.
and you had one woman left and 10 men,
Mm-hmm.
it would take a long time. If those men didn't kill each other, it would take a long time to double that population, because
Absolutely.
she can only have one child
Mm-hmm.
every year.
Mm-hmm.
But if you had 10 women and one man, that population is doubling, every 10 years.
Yes.
And so polygamy was a form of marital institution that was allowed for the repopulation of tribes and communities that have been decimated by warfare.
War. Yeah.
And so historically, it made sense. Otherwise, we had the extinction of certain population groups.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why historically that form of marriage was allowed. Now, when we look at marriage and family today, family is the socializing institution for our children.
Mm-hmm.
And the root of family is a relationship between a man and a woman. And we all know that families function best when both parties are present for the children.
Absolutely.
If you have two men who are raising children, what you are subtracting from that scenario is the presence of a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And the contributions that a woman makes to the family are invaluable. So we don't want to go from single parent households headed by a woman or a man
Mm-hmm.
to same-sex marriages where it is two men or two women, because we're still subtracting from the family unit
Yeah.
the value of both genders.
Now that's one thing that I have definitely thought about in this whole scenario of, same-sex marriages, because you know me, I'm a big advocate for both parents being a part of the kid's life,
Yes, sir.
because theoretically, if you look at the stats, I mean, it's important, because and I always tell customers, people that I talk with, that there's certain things that a mother can teach a child that a father can't,
Absolutely.
and vice versa.
And vice versa.
And it is out. Absolutely no way you can deny it. You can't change it. That's just the way it is.
That's correct.
So I do, as my own personal, I do think about what does that mean? How is that child going to grow up? Because I actually had a person to ask me for our Father of the Year event that we do. Is it okay if two fathers or same-sex marriage father nominate someone? And, it's like, how do I want to answer that? I mean, if he's a father, he's a father. But, it's I still wonder about how the kids are going to grow up. I have a good friend of mine that I used to work with who is pregnant now, and she's married to a woman. And I'm happy for her, but at the same time, I'm still wondering how the baby is going to develop.
Yeah, no, that's a valid question, Mike. And so the issue is not only is fatherhood what men contribute to the socialization of our children, it is also role modeling how the children see their father interacting with the woman,
Mm-hmm.
with the
Mhm.
mother.
Right.
How do they perform as a unit?
Mm-hmm.
That provides an example for the children of how, marriage and relationship between man and woman is supposed to function. Now, I get it. A relationship between a man and a man could be a functional relationship.
Mm-hmm.
What I have a problem with is, where is the contribution of the woman?
Right.
And it's a very valuable contribution to the socialization of the children. And if you're subtracting that from the family unit, then what you're doing is you're making the family unit less. And we had a problem with that, Mike, and I know you've been involved in this work for a long time, but we've always had a problem with that where it comes to single parent households. Now, I came from a single parent household.
Mm-hmm.
I know that things can work, but they're not ideal.
No.
What societies and communities and cultures want to do is promote ideal circumstances for the best interests of the children and not the individual himself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that, I couldn't argue that fact, but I'm going to flip it around and still be a devil's advocate.
All right.
Because who's to say that if you have a man acting like a man, and this is going to freak you out, because I'm just thinking about it, and another male, but he acts like a female, or even sometimes dressed like a female. We have Kardashian, the guy,
Bruce
yeah,
Jenner.
Bruce Jenner. And
Mhm.
so, who's to say that their loving relationship is not something that they want to, that is going to benefit their child in the long run? Because what we want them to see is love, ultimately. We want them to see, like you said, how you should treat one another.
Mhm.
And if there's love in the home,
Mhm.
isn't that what ultimately we want? Because we have man and woman married, and there's some fathers that come home and they're not engaged with the kids any way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
They're there in body,
Mhm.
and they kind of misconstrue what a provider is supposed to be.
Mhm.
Some men just think, okay, well, I bring home the bacon, that's my job, that's it, I'm done.
Mhm.
And that's not it.
Mhm.
So, who's to say that if you got this man and this woman over here that are married, but not really showing the kids love, they see abuse, they see disengagement, but you have a same-sex marriage couple over here, and they're showing a child love.
Mhm.
Now, they are missing a component. Whether it's a man or a woman, they're missing that component.
Mhm.
Not unless the surrogate is there and, they have a piece of the
It's not the
life.
same.
But it's not the same because you're not seeing an interaction
Right.
with that man and woman on a regular basis.
Right.
So, yeah.
Within a formalized unit.
Right.
Now, I have football coaches who were good male role models for me, but even though these people were good role models, that cannot replace a father in a family unit and what that means to a child.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they can help, they cannot replace. And our objective here is to, again, try to promote, well, what is an ideal family unit, even though I know that we have some makeshift families to try to make it happen in spite of the circumstances. Now, yeah, Mike, at the end of the day, we want functional over dysfunctional.
Mm-hmm.
But that can include a whole lot of things. Now, if you have a man who acts like a man in a same-sex marriage and a man who acts like a woman, the key there is acting.
Mm-hmm.
You can act like a woman all day, but you're not a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't, you can get an Academy Award for that. You can put on lipstick and high heels and do all you want to. That doesn't make you a woman.
Mm-hmm.
Even if you get a sex change operation,
Mm-hmm.
like Bruce Jenner is doing, Bruce Jenner is doing,
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make you a woman.
Right.
You may appear as though,
Yeah.
but that doesn't make you that.
Right. And even like my wife used to work at a prison, and there was a lot of men that thought they were women and women thought they were men. But even in the prison system, if you still got your sexual organs as a woman, you're going to still be classified as a woman, and you got to go to the women's bathroom, not the men's,
Right.
and vice versa.
And vice versa.
So that's just the way it is. And, it's a lot of people, don't quite understand, and they'll argue that fact. Well, if she thinks like a woman, if he thinks like a woman, then it's a woman. And no,
No.
I can't even agree with that one. And I'm very open-minded,
Right.
but I can't even agree with that one.
Because even naturally, if you're talking about childbirth, somebody who has had surgery and has breast implants and long hair, whatever have you, they still cannot reproduce a child naturally. And so
Absolutely.
if we're talking about allowing nature to play its role in the repopulation of human beings, and we want to keep things as natural as we possibly can,
Mm-hmm.
because that's what we want to do with our food.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want our food with all these herbicides and pesticides and steroids that are kind of messing up our diet.
Mhm.
So let's keep our
And our
food
lives.
natural, but let's
Yeah.
keep our human beings unnatural. Let's
Yeah.
make synthetic human beings. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
So if we want to keep things as close to nature as we possibly can, then let's not subscribe to the belief that we can do that synthetically.
Yeah. Absolutely. Boy, I love this subject. I knew this was going to be good today. It's just, and it's been on my mind since Randy and I talked about it. It was like, oh yeah, this is going to be good because there's so much about same-sex marriages going on right now. And I know there's a lot of confusion. I know there's a lot of questions that people have. People are waiting to see how that's going to turn out and how that's going to be. But stick around, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to discuss it some more. But you're listening to The Father Show. We got to take a break, but we'll be right back. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to The Father Show, and we're here today with Randal Craven, and we're talking about same-sex marriages. And, you know, we're really hitting on different subjects, and I'm sure, I think I was just about to say, I was telling our engineer that I think on my Facebook page, the Father Show Resource Program and the Father Show Facebook page, I'm going to have to take out comments because anybody listening to the show, there's going to be some comments. And good or bad, you know, right, whether you agree or disagree, you know, there's going to be some comments. But, you know, I tell you what, if you do have a comment, put it on the Facebook page, because this is not going to be the only time Randy and I address this issue. We'll be back and doing it again, so I'd love to be able to bring your comments in and bring them on the show and let's discuss them. So if you have any comments, yeah, go to the Father Show Resource Program website, and when you see the show logged up there, put your comments in there and let us know what you think and how you feel.
Let me add this to that, Mike. So in civilized societies, the foundation for how people get along with each other is discourse. We're gonna agree sometimes, and sometimes we're gonna disagree.
Right.
But what we value is the freedom and the ability to communicate about subject matter that may be controversial. But does that mean we shouldn't have the conversation?
Yeah.
Should we suppress conversation because it's controversial?
Yeah.
Or should we try to achieve understanding, you know, by having discourse, meaningful discourse? Or do you want to talk about the Kardashians all day?
No. And this is why I wanted to do the show, because we have to get some understanding. You know, you see all this stuff with Donald Trump, and almost like he wants to bring back racism all over again. And, you know, we have to get an understanding of each other and how we are. You know, you mentioned that in the black community, being gay is still described as a malfunction in the brain. And I know in the Spanish community, not too far either. I think they're a little bit more, maybe just a tad bit more accepting of it than we are. But I know that being a part of the Spanish community now, that we're so much alike, it ain't even funny. So I know in the Caucasian community it's been accepted longer than it has been in the black and the Spanish community.
Well, homosexuality was considered as an abnormality, and it was listed in the DSM, the Diagnostics and Statistics Manual for Mental Health, as a psychological disorder until 1973. So European culture or American culture has seen it as an abnormality until 1973. Black traditional perspectives of homosexuality is that it is an abnormality. There are other abnormalities that we don't want to validate as normal. We don't want to validate incest as normal. We don't. There are groups out there now that are trying to validate pedophilia as normal versus abnormal. So the issue is if we don't have some sense for rightness and wrongness, we can be led to believe that pedophilia is a valid form of sexual expression. And so we can't continue to write God out of the script where it concerns how we define how to do life.
Well, what I see sometimes is that and I think you even hit on it earlier, it's not that we do write the script, to fit our needs. You know, we'll take
Our desires.
and our needs and our desires.
Mhm.
We change it. Well, that's okay because I'm not gonna listen to that part. I'm gonna take that piece out. You know, and it's like, no, if it's supposed to be this way, if the word of God is supposed to be this way, then why are you deviating? You know, in different ways. And I'm talking any church, any religion that you look at. I mean, look at the Catholic religion, not to, you know, jump on them because the Baptist is, I look at Baptists like, okay, you preach against homosexuality, but you're musicians
It's
in most
practicing
cases
it, yeah.
is practicing it. And
Right.
so he is like, really? Okay,
Right.
there's something there. And then
There's
you,
hypocrisy there.
right. And then you have the Catholic religion that are, their priests are, I put it this way, I just look at it, they're raping these little kids.
Right.
And you're not saying it's okay, but you're really not doing anything to stop it, because you're saying in a man's mind, you're not, as a priest, you're not supposed to have any sexual relationship, you're not supposed to get married and things of that nature. And grant you, God says sex is for reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, I kind of heard Steve Harvey say today, well, once you taste that fruit, brother, you screwed. You know,
Yeah.
so
It's a very difficult
it is.
drive to keep under control.
And as a counselor, how do you counsel someone that is dealing with, say, homosexuality?
Yeah, so my approach is that a lot of people are confused about their sexuality,
Mm-hmm.
especially the people that come to me for treatment where it concerns gender identity. They're not clear. They're not sure. They don't know. A lot of people, not all, but a lot of people who choose the gay or lesbian lifestyle have been sexually assaulted, they've been
Mhm.
sexually abused, they've
Mhm.
been sexually molested, and so their response to, especially in a lot of cases the women, their response to hatred for men has nothing to do with being born gay or lesbian, has everything to do with their hatred for men.
Yeah.
I have, and in some sense, I work with a lot of youth,
Mm-hmm.
and it can be trendy among young people because they're seeing the popularity of it, and so they have no idea what it means to be gay or lesbian, but they're behaving in ways that reflect those ideas,
Mhm.
and they're not clear about who or what they are.
Do you think it's just trendy, or do you think it's a lack of the acceptance of it more? That they're willing to experiment but they think they really are. But maybe they say, hey, I want to, they're really experimenting in a sense.
No, I agree with you, man. It is that it is publicly becoming more acceptable
Mm-hmm.
in this particular culture, and so it makes it easier for young folks to make a decision to experiment in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's who they are or that that's good for them. There's not even really any good science that will tell people you are homosexual or not.
Mhm.
There's no good science out there to determine that.
Yeah.
People will say, well, no, Randy, there's been a homosexual gene that's been identified. If you look at the science on that, that kind of science has been produced by people who have an agenda to advance homosexuality.
Right.
And so you have to look at the validity and the objectivity of it. There is some scientists who say that there's an alcoholic gene. Well, if you have an alcoholic gene that you were born with, does that mean that you have no choice
Well,
in whether or not you become an alcoholic?
and I agree, because you hear a lot of times that if one of your parents was an alcoholic, then you're carrying that gene, and
Right.
you'll probably be an alcoholic.
Mhm.
And I totally disagree with that,
Right.
because first of all, I just tell people, don't put everybody in one dang on box. Okay, it just doesn't work. Everybody. My dad was an alcoholic.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
and I think it was a lot of because he was fighting the war. And I guess if I was out here killing people on a daily basis and dodging bullets, I'd probably become an alcoholic too.
Right.
Not to excuse it,
No.
but the fact of the
That's
matter
part
is,
of warfare was introducing drugs and alcohol
right. So
to the enemy.
if my dad turned into alcoholic, then how come I'm not?
Right.
And I can have a drink, and some days are like, God, I don't even want to think about having a drink
Right.
because it's not in me.
Exactly.
And I grew up, I was in music, and I grew up drinking, and shoot, as young as, I'm not gonna say because my kids watch this show, but I had alcohol, and
In your environment.
and I know how to control it. I don't even have any desire whatsoever to drink on a daily basis.
Right.
I couldn't stand to have a drink on a daily basis.
At the end of the day, Mike, you have the freedom to choose
Absolutely,
whether or not
yes.
you take that drink or not. I don't care what preferences or inclinations you were born with. At the end of the day, our nature is such that we have mind over matter.
Mm-hmm.
That's our nature. We were
Mhm.
created, we were designed with that power for our minds to have power over physical circumstances.
Yes.
And so we can choose.
So we do have a choice, and
Yeah.
you do have to learn how to control even some things that is incorrect, like incest. You know it's incorrect, and you saying,
You
"Oh,
don't
I
have to be
can't."
taught that.
No, I can't control it. I disagree.
I disagree. You
I
can.
I totally disagree on that.
There are arguments that people are saying, well, they can't control whether or not they're attracted. Now, you can choose not to participate in activity that you have come to realize is morally wrong.
Mm-hmm.
There are some people in the gay community who morally choose not to participate in the gay lifestyle.
Well, and could that be some of them don't want to be controlled, that they don't want somebody else telling them that they can't do this or that?
Well, for the people who I know who make that choice,
Mm-hmm.
they're saying that they don't see participation in the gay lifestyle as a valid way of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so even though they may have those inclinations, they choose not to participate intentionally
Mm-hmm.
because of their moral structure.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the biggest arguments that I use for distinguishing between what is gay and what is black. Because black people can't get up in the morning and choose not to be black. I don't care. But if you are, and then I've had clients who were at one point in time participating in a gay lifestyle, and today they're happy and heterosexual.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's really no scientific validity to this idea that a person is fixed into this particular alternative of gender identity because of what they were born with.
Mm-hmm.
And so people can choose stuff like that all day. Guys in prison, that are totally heterosexual will participate in homosexuality based on the circumstances.
Yeah.
And so that's a choice, Mike.
Yeah, yeah. And we do have choices. Sometimes we don't want to admit that we have the choice. We'd rather say, I'm just that way.
The choice is taken from me.
Yeah, I'm a butthead because I'm just born that way.
Yeah, that's who I am.
That's who I am. So, I tell you, Randy, it has been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you.
Been good.
And as I said before, I know I want to have more conversation with you because, I think we can really bounce things off of each other and
We can do this all day.
Yes, and have our audience have a ball with it and make fun. So thank you so much for joining me on the show today. And ladies and gentlemen, unfortunately, that is our show today. We run out of time, but Randy will be back, and we will be continue some of this discussion on same-sex marriage and other things as well. So please stay with us, stay tuned, look us up on the Facebook, come and join us and watch the show. Thank you so much, Randy, for joining us. This is Mike Thompson. I'm your host of The Father Show, and we'll see you next week